Hello there, fandoms of the world. My name is The Geek Theorist, and welcome to my review/analysis of RWBY Volume 4, Episodes 2 and 3. After receiving feedback from you guys on my review of Episode 1, I've decided to make this a weekly series throughout the entirety of the volume, and I hope you enjoy. That being said, I'm sorry I missed last week. I had a lot of stuff going on and wasn't able to put out a review. As such, today's video will be a joint review of Episodes 2 and 3. Let's not waste any more time and get right into the review. Let me start off by saying that Episode 2 took a bit of a turn from what I think most of us were expecting, that being a full episode centered on Weiss. Instead, we got a lot of Weiss, but also some more of Team Ranger, though this is in no way a bad thing, as I'll explain later on in this review. The episode does begin with Weiss, however, as we pick up where Episode 1 left off. On the way to speak with her father, we are introduced to a new character, Weiss's younger brother, Whitley. Before we get into the character of Whitley, however, this is a review of the episode, and as such, I will be offering occasional criticism. That being said, the scene of dialogue between Weiss and Whitley felt just a bit off for some reason, almost as though each response was happening just a half a second or so too late. This may just be a minor editing issue, as it doesn't happen at any other point throughout the rest of the episode, or it's possible that this was an intentional choice to make the scene awkward or unsettling. On that topic, I've seen a lot of theories already about whether or not Whitley is trustworthy. In my opinion, there are two signs which point towards Whitley being an antagonistic character. The first, as already mentioned, is this off-putting timing while the two siblings speak, if we are to assume that this is an intentional choice by the writers. The second is the family portrait that we see at the end of this scene. In this portrait, Weiss and Winter, two characters that we know are trustworthy, are frowning and appear upset. Whitley, on the other hand, wears a satisfied expression, as does Mr. Schnee. It's possible that this difference between Whitley and his siblings is only a result of a difference in age, but I do believe it is foreshadowing the fact that Whitley cannot be trusted. Following this conversation between Weiss and Whitley, the episode takes an unexpected turn, and we focus once again on Team Ranger. The scene begins with mostly darkness, with silver and gold spots of light along the edges of the screen. Pyrrha's voice can be heard calling for John, but it is stopped abruptly as RWBY wakes up, and we find out that this was a dream. I'll discuss this more in depth later on, but it definitely seems like hinting or foreshadowing of some future plot point. From here, Team Ranger continues on their journey, before coming across a village that has been ransacked by bandits and Grimm. The importance of this scene is that it demonstrates the very real danger that exists in Remnant. After the events of the end of Volume 3, the audience should be hyper aware of the danger that our characters are in, and scenes like this help keep that notion that nobody is truly safe in the back of our minds. At the end of the scene, Nora and Ren come across some kind of symbol or footprint on the ground and give each other a look. Perhaps this could be hinting at the fact that we'll be learning more about their past as the volume progresses. Following this moment between Nora and Ren, the focus is directed back to Weiss entering her father's office, where the man is arguing with our good friend, James Ironwood. The three important things we can take away from this scene are that Mr. Schnee is showing some very antagonistic signs already. Ironwood extends his assistance to Weiss should she need it, and Mr. Schnee asks Weiss to sing at some kind of charity event, to which she agrees, with some initial hesitation. Other than that, not much of consequence occurs. Just take note that Weiss's dad is not a good dude, and I believe we may see Ironwood playing a big role in this part of the story in the future. After leaving her father's office, Weiss is met by her family's butler, Klein. This scene is strange, for sure, as the man's eye color and mood appear to rapidly change out of nowhere. At first I thought this was foreshadowing that he too could not be trusted, and that maybe somehow he was even Neo, but some Tumblr users were helpfully pointing out that his eye colors and moods seem to each correspond with one of the 7 dwarves from Snow White, which fits perfectly into Weiss's fairy tale theme. At this point, Klein appears to be a trustworthy ally to Weiss. After this conversation between Weiss and Klein ends, we are again shown a dark screen with flecks of light near the edges, and Pyrrha's voice can be heard once more. This time when RWBY wakes up, however, Pyrrha's voice doesn't stop, and RWBY traces it to find Jean training with a recording of Pyrrha talking. This scene needs to be experienced, as attempting to put it into words wouldn't do it any justice, but I will say that the entire thing is just heartbreaking. Instead, however, I want to focus on the dream sequences RWBY is experiencing at the beginning of this scene and the last Team Ranger scene. Based on the strange orbs of light during these dreams, as well as the fact that Pyrrha's voice can be heard, I believe that Pyrrha is still alive in some manner. Whether or not she is truly alive and has found some way to communicate with Ruby, or she is only alive through aura, is unclear yet, but I do believe Pyrrha's consciousness or spirit lives on in Remnant. Only time will tell, but I wouldn't count Pyrrha out of the picture just yet. The episode ends on this scene of Jean training with Pyrrha's video, as Ruby walks back to the campsite. All in all, this was another great episode. Despite the fact that most people were expecting an episode focused almost entirely on Weiss, the reality of the episode was perhaps better than what we had imagined. We got what we needed from the Weiss scenes, and were introduced to some new characters who will no doubt become more relevant down the line. Furthermore, the Team Ranger scenes only enhanced the episode as a whole, with the final scene of Jean training with Pyrrha's video being perhaps the best scene of the volume thus far. All in all, I give this episode another A- rating. Though it was excellent for the most part, it was disappointing to see none of Blake or Yang, and while the Jean scenes have been great, the writers need to remember who the main characters are. These shortcomings only bring the episode down a little, however, hence the A- rating. Moving on to episode 3, boy, was this a polarizing episode. On one hand, we finally got to see both Blake and Yang in one episode, but on the other, one character's actions in particular caused quite a stir in the fandom. Let's break it down and figure out what exactly was so divisive about this episode. The first shot we see is of a large boat traveling through some kind of body of water, before we focus in on everyone's favorite cat Faunus. Blake's new outfit and character model look great in the new style, and while I think the animation team still has a bit of learning to do when it comes to facial expressions, I do believe the new style is objectively better than the previous volumes. Not much of importance happens in the first minute or so of this episode, other than Blake displaying clear signs of PTSD from the confrontation with Adam at the end of Volume 3. At about 3 minutes in, however, we are treated to a big moment in which Blake removes her bow and casts it into the sea. I'm not sure how much I agree with this moment happening at this point in the story, however. On one hand, sure, Blake is heading home and is surrounded by other Faunus who have no need to hide their features, and it makes sense that as a result she too would feel safe revealing her Faunus ears. On the other, the bows seem to represent a large part of Blake's character, the part of her that felt the need to stay hidden and reserved as a result of the discrimination and abuse she'd suffered in her past. To just cast such a symbolism-heavy item off in such a casual moment feels like underplaying the importance of Blake's past and character arc. After the bow falls down into the water, Blake walks away from the edge of the boat, and we see a cloaked figure watching her, as something large swims by the side of the boat. The scene ends, and we immediately jump cut to Yang sitting on the couch in her father's house, looking broken and dejected. It is clear that she is still suffering from the depression of losing her arm and her team, and that her path to recovery is still in its early stages. Tai Yang enters and reveals that Ironwood has sent Yang a robotic arm. This is the second moment in this episode which has caused division between fans. While it is great to see Yang getting a new arm so that she can get back on her feet and start fighting again, many fans, myself included, were hoping to see Yang recover and learn to fight just as well with only one arm. This would mean so much for fans of RWBY who are also living with disabilities, but it seems as of now that Yang will be using a new robotic arm. However, Yang does not appear ready to use this arm at this time, and she rejects the gift. We then see a few short clips of Yang working around the house and doing chores, having learned to adjust to life with only one arm. However, when a glass slips out of her hand and shatters on the floor, we see just how much Adam's attack has affected her, as she gasps, looking terrified, while visions of Adam flash on screen. I believe this scene is incredibly important, as it is now clear that the writers are doing their best to demonstrate just how much the post-traumatic stress as a result of the confrontation with Adam has affected both Yang and Blake. Back on the boat, the cloaked figure from before continues to watch Blake, before she senses somebody watching her and attempts to confront the figure. Before she can, however, a monstrous sea grim rises from the water, revealing itself to be the large creature that had swam by the boat earlier on. Blake and the members of the crew join together to attempt to fight the giant Grim, and during the fight, the cloaked figure reveals himself as Sun. With Blake, Sun, and the ship's crew working together, they are able to take down the Grim, albeit with quite a bit of one-sided flirting along the way. After the fight, Blake slaps Sun across the face for following her. After this, Blake and Sun speak on the deck of the ship, and Sun reveals that after seeing Blake run off after the Battle of Beacon, he decided to follow her. This is, of course, the thing that everyone has been talking about since the episode premiered. I won't get into it much here, but if you want my more in-depth personal opinion, you can go check out my Tumblr, where I've shared my thoughts on this issue. All I'll say here is that while Sun may have had the best intentions, stalking a friend for 6 months without revealing yourself to them is definitely creepy and wrong. I'm not saying Sun is a bad guy. He just made a bad choice. After this confession, Blake and Sun continue talking, and she reveals that she is not interested in fighting the White Fang, but is instead headed back home to Menagerie to be with her family. The scene ends without much more of consequence being said, and we head to the final scene, where Salem and Cinder are seated at the table from episode 1 in Salem's Fortress. This scene was a bit confusing, and introduced a very creepy new type of Grimm. But ultimately what we got out of it is that Cinder is finally able to speak, as Salem asked her to answer herself whether or not she killed Ozpin, and Cinder confirms this with a yes. All in all, this episode was a bit of a roller coaster ride. It certainly had its high points, such as the fight between Blake, Sun, and the boat crew versus the Sea Grimm, and the interactions between Yang and Tai Yang. It also, however, had its low points, such as Sun's problematic actions and the downplaying of Blake removing her bow. I would give this episode a B- rating overall. Its highs don't necessarily entirely make up for its lows, but it was still a solid episode nonetheless. So what do you think? Let me know your thoughts on episodes 2 and 3 in the comments down below, and be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed. This has been The Geek Theorist. Until next time.